if you're being surrounded, make sure you're not being surrounded. If you're dying, make sure you're not dying. And if your squad mates are dying, make sure your squad mates are not dying. Hello and welcome to the Exalted March, where I talk about Dragon Age, Mass Effect, and BioWare games in general. So I will be doing some gameplay eventually on the channel, and this is how we're going to start. We're basically going to start with a tactics video for Dragon Age 2, which I am aware is a game that came out more than 6 years ago. Basically, I'm going to try and do tactic stuff like this with Mass Effect Andromeda and Dragon Age Inquisition, and this is basically kind of like a test run for that. And I've been replaying the Dragon Age series recently, and I have found that I think, in particular, I noticed that the tactics you can see here, you've got actually as many as 20 tactic slots that you can go through for each of your 4 party members. You have your behavior overarching archetype that you can set, and then you have your presets. So basically this is kind of the stuff that people complain about being removed from Dragon Age Inquisition, and I thought it might be interesting to kind of take a look back at Dragon Age 2. I could have done Dragon Age Origins, I just so happened to be in the middle of a playthrough for Dragon Age 2, and I thought it might be interesting to kind of do this as a test run for the channel and see how I do with gameplay videos, because generally I don't like Let's Plays and things like that as far as watching them. Nothing against them. There's a couple of channels that I like for their Let's Plays. In general, I just think it's better to do a shorter, more concise video on a specific topic. So, with that being said, I'm going to take you through at least these 3 characters just to kind of give you an idea of how I set up tactics. I'm playing this run on normal, and if I'm not mistaken, my last one might have been whatever the one above normal is, hardcore, etc. Okay, so for Anders, looking at this, pretty much you can tell. I mean, you can play Anders for DPS, but for the most part, I'm playing him as a healer. And also, I mean, just it kind of goes without saying that if I'm going to go into this, I'm not going to go too much in depth about Dragon Age tactics in general. I'm kind of assuming that anyone who watches this video is familiar with the idea of Dragon Age tactics, either in Dragon Age Origins or Dragon Age 2, etc. So I'm kind of operating under the understanding that you know what the basic spells are and you kind of know what a tactics page is from having played the game yourself. Okay, so basically the tactic number 1, I always set this for if he's surrounded by at least 2 people to use Mind Blast. Some people will put a healing behavior in the number 1 slot. I've always felt that with mages, and I do this pretty much consistently. I did it all throughout my playthrough of Origins, and I always do it with mages in Dragon Age 2 as well, is that the first thing you really want them to worry about is kind of getting people off of them. And if you use something like Mind Blast, in particular, if you have the upgrade selected where it's got 100% stun chance on normal enemies, you will then buy yourself time for tactics 2 and 3. Right, so the second tactic for Anders, keep yourself alive first. He is kind of playing, he's kind of split healer. He's kind of split between healer and some DPS. I've got him, I don't have him as a straight healer because I think it's kind of nice, especially if you're playing as a mage hawk, which I am. To have 2 mages both kind of focusing on damage, you can be pretty, or actually highly effective with that. But anyway, before we get into the back half of the tactics, pretty much the first half here, these first 3 are the ones that you mainly want to focus on. If you're being surrounded, make sure you're not being surrounded. If you're dying, make sure you're not dying. And if your squad mates are dying, make sure your squad mates are not dying. So those are the main 3 that I have. But just speaking to this mindset, I think it's really important that if you have them being surrounded, you know, you can try and, I mean, you can do a healing spell, but you're then right back into the same position that you were when you were taking all of that damage. So first, buy yourself some breathing room. If you're about to die, heal yourself, because if you're the healer and you're not alive, well, then your squad's not going to be very alive either. So then next, heal off the squad. I generally speaking, I mean, this is just my most recent playthrough. I didn't set this up specifically for this video. So as I go through Varick and Isabella, also I might actually be remembering what I put on here more than this being anything that I pre-planned out. But normally I do not have them use potions. I normally like to kind of manage the potion use myself, even though I have a ridiculous amount of potions at this point. That's kind of a Dragon Age Inquisition mentality. Is in Dragon Age Inquisition, they obviously have that setting, but man, your squad goes through potions really, really fast in Dragon Age Inquisition. So for this, I normally do not have them use any potions. I normally just have them stick to healing spells, both Anders, and also I do have Meryl spec'd out similarly, only instead of her being healing with a mixture of DPS, she's more healing with a mixture of buff, debuff. So now basically the back half of the tactics, pretty simple. Chain Lightning is upgraded. It's going to be his most effective DPS tool at this point. And I am setting that to have it go against enemies that are clustered. Obviously, Chain Lightning, as the name implies, is going to hit multiple people if they're close together. So you can set this to do enemies clustered to at least 3 enemies, and then it's going to use Chain Lightning. After that, I pretty much want to make sure that he's using powers. I don't want him to default into the basic staff attack. So I've got him making sure that he uses at least Winter's Grasp and Spirit Bolt. As I said, this is kind of impromptu. This is just kind of a video that I'm putting together to see how I do with gameplay videos. So I can do something more detailed like this in the future, where I actually plan out a little more carefully what's on here. This was actually what I happened to be rolling with, and it has been working really well. But let's have a look. What else can we do for Anders, right? So he's got a few more abilities. Nope. Not correct. He's got a few other abilities that could be useful that I could add into tactics, right? So immediately we see Barrier, and then he's also got the, not regroup, 8 allies. So he's got the 8 allies, which is basically like the group heal. It's a health regeneration, 25% for all party members. So we could also probably do some more stuff here. Actually, I got a couple of things here. So since we're doing him as a mixture of DPS and healing, let's do a little bit of this. Do we have... Ally knocked down, dead. So let's just do this, right? He's a healer and he's got regroup. So if someone is dead, I mean, that's kind of one of his main things that we have. They should use regroup, right? If an ally has been completely defeated, we can have him use regroup. And then also for him doing damage, and this is kind of like a debuff / damage ability, if we have an enemy that is ranked elite or higher, they're going to have a higher pool of health. And it's always nice, and I tend to do this manually anyway, that's why I'm setting this as a tactic. Let's have him use Walking Bomb. And Walking Bomb is obviously going to do damage over time, and that's going to help whittle away at that higher health pool for any enemy that we run into. Okay, so we can go ahead and do that for Anders. And let's go over to Varick. This is already going to be at 10 minutes, and I kind of wanted this to be a short video, so let's just look real quickly at Varick. This is kind of in the vein, once again, I know some people might not do this the same way that I do. I'm always a big proponent of, if they are surrounded, if they are taking tons of attention or drawing lots of aggro, get out of danger first, kind of self-preservation first above everything else. So tactic number 1, again, in that vein of self-survival, if surrounded by at least 3 enemies, use stealth. Pretty much basically after that, this is just so that he basically has Bianca's song on all the time, especially if you are used to using, no, I'm sorry, not rhyming triplet, where's the normal archery, or the specialist tree? So if you're used to using speed to get 10% plus to attack speed, or maybe you're using precision to get attack percentage up and get critical chance up, another thing that you can do with within this marksman tree for Varick is, number 1, he has a passive, which is really, really great to get the well-oiled passive. You're going to get plus 20 to attack speed, which is better than the speed, which is better than the speed sustained mode, even if you upgrade it. So the sustained mode is going to use 20% of your stamina at all times. You're going to get a 10% boost to attack speed, and then you're going to get plus 5 if you do the additional upgrade. Whereas with the well-oiled passive, you get a 20% to attack speed without reserving any of your stamina. Now, if you want to stack those two, of course, you can get a huge boost to attack speed, but I generally find that it's better to just use Bianca's song, which is going to, especially if you've got it upgraded, you're going to get attack speed, you're going to get attack, you're going to get critical damage. This is basically a crazy sustained mode. Varick should always have this on, and it only uses 15% of stamina. So for less than the amount of reserve stamina that it costs you to do 10% more speed, you get 20% more speed, 20% more attack, 30 to critical damage, and 20 to critical chance. I mean, again, always have this on. So going back to tactics, that's why you can see, other than the self-preservation, it's basically the first thing that he should do, and it kind of just stays on all the time. This I'm going to reorder a little bit. Again, I hadn't actually been looking at this too closely. So we see the first two offensive tactics are if 3 enemies are clustered together, we'll use miasmic flass. I always, words are hard pretty much, so pronunciation notwithstanding, this is basically a tactic that stuns people. What I would actually have him do is use Bursting Arrow first. The requirement's going to be a little bit lower because the AoE for Bursting Arrow is not as wide anyway, and I don't even mind if he uses Bursting Arrow on a single enemy. I really don't care. I just want him to use it. If I'm not mistaken, the recharge time is not overly high and the damage is pretty decent. I would rather have him use Hail of Arrows before this. Actually, I think I know why I did this originally. This is going to stun people, so it's going to hold them in place. One of the things that happens when you do Hail of Arrows is that people continue to move outward from the radius of that AoE, so they're basically running away from the AoE damage. The reason why this isn't really as necessary is because Anders, remember, right, we want our tactics between these to all work together. Anders is going to do Chain Lightning if there are 3 enemies clustered together. And in addition to doing quite a bit of damage, Chain Lightning is also going to stop normal enemies from moving around. I can't remember if it slows them also, but I know that it definitely stops them, at least on the initial attack. Hawk, if for whatever reason I'm not controlling Hawk, he's going to do the same thing. As you can tell, I'm a big fan of Chain Lightning. Stopping people with this flask ability is not quite as necessary. I wouldn't mind if he does it, but still, I kind of prefer Hail of Arrows happening first. This is interesting, right? So pinning shot if they are enemy health 50% or lower, and also kickback if they're 50% or lower. I probably wasn't being too specific on this. I've got if they're ranked normal or higher, use Rhyming Triplet. Yeah, fair enough. This could be played with. I don't know why the conditional on this is health 50% or lower. It might make more sense to do. I mean, depending on the enemy that's doing the attacking, you could do something like enemy at range. Right, you could do long range. See, so the reason why you could do medium or long range is I like to use pinning shot when I use it manually to stop attacking rogues or warriors really far away from where my party is at, and kind of takes them out of the fight for a few seconds. But the problem with doing that with tactics is that there's really no good way. I mean, you can do it a couple of different ways. You can do enemy as class, right? Where is it? No, right? And isn't there a way to do warrior or rogue? Right, nearest visible class. I could do something like nearest visible warrior, but that's not necessarily going to pick the furthest one. You kind of want something that says if they're a warrior who's also in long range, then use pinning shot, but unfortunately the conditionals don't let you form anything quite like that. This is also, let's see here. So let's go to pinning shot. Pinning shot should also have a little bit of damage over time if it's upgraded. So it's got a disorient chance. So which pinning chance 80% versus normal enemies. Then it's also got the disorient chance, which is not bad. If you do have someone who's below 50%, if I had to guess, I would say I probably set this as the conditional so that they're easier to finish off as they get lower on health. Kickback, I'm just going to mess with this really quick. I would actually say use kickback because of the damage and the ability to potentially... Right, so we can potentially take someone out who might be doing higher damage, at least momentarily with kickback. Kickback's going to do damage, and unless they pass a physical check, I think it's going to knock them backwards. Yeah, and then we can pretty much do Rhyming Triplet above anyone else. Put that up there. So we can do Varick like that. Save that. I don't know why it didn't ask me to save it for Anders, but whatever. So lastly, Isabella. Isabella, I remember I set this and then I thought, wow, this is kind of funny. If you really want to see something interesting, I don't know about the effectiveness of this in combat, but man, it's fun to watch. So I have her set. The top two tactics are basically nearest visible attack, just basic standard attack, and then enemy highest health attack. So if you can figure out how that works, just think through that logically for a second, right? First, the number one priority tactic is to attack the nearest visible person. So she does that. But then her second tactic after that is attack the person with the highest health. So because of these two tactics playing together, essentially it's pretty funny. If you get into combat with Isabella, poor Isabella ends up kind of like running around just like a pinball flying between different enemies. She's kind of like, she does a lot of damage, it's great, but she's kind of like a high DPS, like schizophrenic ADD attacker. Like she just kind of can't decide on which target she wants to use. And then I've got something really basic, like if enemy is using melee attack, then use backstab, surrender. So, okay. There's a problem with these tactics. Like, I'm just going to go ahead and be pretty transparent here for this being a tactics video. I didn't pay a lot of attention when I was doing this, if I'm being kind of frank with myself. We'll kind of, if you look at this for a second, you can kind of tell something that jumps out right away that's wrong with it, as I have another sip of Blue Moon. So, if these two tactics are the number one and number two tactics, you're pretty much never going to get to much else, but you're also specifically not going to get to the ones that you really need, like evade and stealth. So I'm breaking my own rule here with the self-preservation first. So I'm going to say, and these are kind of redundant, if we've got surrounded by 3 enemies, use evade or stealth. So what I'm going to do here instead is I'm going to say only actually go into stealth if you're in like a lot of trouble. So if you've got like 4 enemies, then you can use stealth. Otherwise, just do it with 3. And then after that, what else do we have? Oh, I had this also. This was actually kind of interesting, kind of skipping ahead down to the bottom. I had this so that she would kind of act a little bit like Hawk's protector, right? Enemies attacking Hawk, use backstab. Actually, let's change that. Enemies attacking Hawk, use Twin Fangs, which is going to be her highest damage attack. And I've got this as pretty much anyone attacking Hawk, so I don't know really why we need the other conditional of whether or not Hawk is below 50%, and all it does is shoot back up to this one. So I'm not really sure why that one was necessary. If the enemy is using, well, actually, shouldn't that be self being attacked by magic? Yeah, so if she's being attacked by magic, use evade. Because generally speaking, I think that when she draws aggro from a group of people, I want her to avoid enemies if she's surrounded, but also if she is attacking a mage, that mage is going to immediately start to use high-level spells against her because she's going to doing all that damage, she's going to draw the attention of the mage. So it's kind of nice if we can interrupt the mage's chain of attacks with evade. So we also want to move this one higher. Someone is attacking Hawk, sure, but also, once again, elite or higher, use ability, Twin Fangs. Let's move this up higher, and then I would also say, let's get rid of the nearest visible, because nearest visible is basically, I mean, you really never need to set that as a conditional. That's kind of handled by the aggressive behavior anyway. So again, you're kind of learning what not to do on some of these tactics. Let's see, so self being attacked by melee, which that's pretty much going to be all the time anyway. I'm basically just saying pretty much right to start off with. As soon as you start to engage with someone, use backstab, because that's her basic That's the one that I end up using when I take control of her manually the most anyway. It's good. It kind of stops them from carrying out their string of attacks for a second, and then you can get a high chance for critical. Or I think with the upgrade, it might even be 100% chance critical. I'm not sure. So, again, self-preservation, evade if you're surrounded, evade if you're being attacked by a mage. If someone is elite or higher, use your highest damage attack. Pretty much anytime you're engaged in a melee exchange, make sure to use backstab. If you're surrounded by tons of people, then you can use stealth. Otherwise, see, this I think I'll leave as sort of like one of the lower level ones. If there's nothing else to do, actually, put that at the bottom. If Hawk is being attacked, go defend Hawk. And if there's nothing else to do, just attack whoever has the most health. So that is a brief tactics video for Dragon Age 2. Again, I'll probably try and do these in a more specific way, maybe with Dragon Age Inquisition, maybe with Mass Effect Andromeda, which I'm also playing, and I might also do some Let's Play with Dragon Age 2 as I finish my playthrough. This is actually a pretty heavily modded version of Dragon Age 2, very, very high resolution texture pack on here, bunch of different textures for Hawk, Isabella, Anders, etc. So maybe more Dragon Age 2 to come in the future. Be sure to leave a comment if you have any thoughts on the tactics or anything else to Dragon Age, Mass Effect, and BioWare related that you would like to see in the future. Once again, and as always, thanks for watching, Masaranis, and